Alien Beastwoman stole my blanket and called it our nest. The campfire burned low, embers popping softly in the crisp night air. I leaned back against my rucksack, wrapped tightly in my wool blanket, and tried not to think about how far I was from civilization. The wilderness on this planet was endless. Miles of black forest, shadowed valleys, and skies swarming with unknown stars. My assignment was simple: survey and record. Yet isolation pressed heavy on me. The nights were the worst. That was when I first heard it. A soft crunch of twigs. A rustle against the underbrush. My hand instinctively reached for the flare pistol at my side. The noise grew closer, heavy but careful, like something big trying not to be noticed. My pulse quickened. Then, from the shadows, a pair of golden eyes appeared. She stepped into the light. 7 feet tall, powerful, and lithe. Her form was both human and not. Her body was covered in short, silver-gray fur that shimmered with the firelight. Her features were sharp, beast-like, but not monstrous. Her mane of dark hair tumbled down her back, framing a face that was half feral and half beautiful. Froze. The creature tilted her head, sniffed the air, and padded closer on digitigrade legs. My first thought was predator. My second, strangely, was awe. "You've been watching me," I muttered, voice unsteady. Her ears twitched. She crouched by the fire, warmth glinting off the amber flecks in her eyes. For a long, tense moment, we simply stared at each other. Then, without warning, she reached forward and yanked my blanket away. "Hey!" I stood, shivering at once. She growled, but not with menace, more like a warning. Then she sniffed the fabric, clutched it to her chest, and wrapped herself inside. The sight would have been comical if not for the seriousness in her gaze. That was the message burning in those eyes. I swallowed hard. "That's not yours. I need it to stay warm." But she wasn't listening. She carefully spread the blanket out on the ground near the fire, smoothing it with clawed fingers. Then she lowered herself onto it and curled her body in a motion that reminded me of a wolf circling its den. "Our nest," she said suddenly, her voice deep, guttural but clear. Blink. "What?" She patted the blanket beside her. "Our nest." The words shocked me more than her appearance. She could speak. Broken, heavy, but unmistakably human speech. I shook my head, heart hammering. Look, I'm not staying in any nest with you." Her ears flicked back. A low rumble vibrated in her chest. She didn't like my refusal. Yet she didn't attack either. Instead, she lay down and fixed her gaze on me, as if daring me to challenge her claim. I paced the fire's edge, debating. If she wanted to kill me, she would have done it already. Instead, she had stolen my blanket and declared it a shared home. The strangeness of it all pressed against me, surreal and terrifying. Finally, against better judgment, I sat down, at a distance. The night air was cold, and without my blanket I was already shivering. I could feel her eyes on me the entire time. Hours passed. I fought to stay awake, but exhaustion won. When I opened my eyes again, the fire had dwindled to ash, and I was no longer sitting alone. She had moved closer in the night. The blanket was wrapped around both of us, her body curled protectively against mine. I stiffened at the warmth of her fur brushing my arm, at the strength I could feel coiled beneath her skin. My first instinct was to pull away. But then I realized something startling. I wasn't cold anymore. Her breathing was steady. She was asleep. I studied her face in the faint light of the dawn, so alien yet softened in slumber. Her arm draped across my chest like a shield. My blanket, once mine alone, had indeed become something shared. When her eyes flickered open, I expected anger or hunger. Instead, she looked at me with something else entirely. A strange, searching tenderness. "You stay," she murmured. The words hit me deeper than they should have. I hesitated, every survival instinct screaming at me to escape, to run back to the shuttle, to record this as an encounter and never risk such closeness again. Yet another part of me, a quieter, stubborn part, knew I couldn't. Not yet. I exhaled slowly. "Fine. I'll stay." Her lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile but close enough. She pressed her forehead briefly to mine, then curled back against me, clutching the blanket tighter. And just like that, my lonely campfire had become something else. Place no longer empty. A nest, claimed by an alien beastwoman who, against all reason, had chosen me. As the new sun rose, I realized the strangest truth of all. I didn't want my blanket back. Her lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile but close enough. She pressed her forehead briefly to mine, her breath warm and strangely steady, then curled back against me, clutching the blanket tighter. The rumble in her chest softened, almost like a purr, as if my answer had given her peace. I sat there stiff at first, torn between instinct and reason. Every survival protocol in my head screamed this was dangerous, that getting attached to an unknown species was reckless. But the loneliness of the last weeks pressed just as hard. She wasn't threatening me. She wasn't leaving either. The fire's embers hissed softly, fading into ash. Beyond the clearing, the dark forest stirred with distant calls. Yet in that fragile circle of warmth, I felt a barrier around me, not from the flames but from her. Her arm across my chest wasn't a trap. It was protection. When the dawn broke, pale light spilling through the trees, I saw her face again in its truest form. Alien, sharp, wild. And still, beneath all that, a gentleness lingered in her eyes when she looked at me. "You are mine," she said, tapping the blanket, then my chest. "Our nest." The words should have filled me with fear. Instead, they settled into me like a weight I no longer wanted to lift. My blanket, once a simple barrier against the cold, had become something else entirely, a symbol of belonging. And as the first rays of sunlight struck the ground, I realized I didn't want it back. Not alone, anyway. Against every expectation, against all sense, I whispered the only answer I had left. "Yeah. Our nest." Her forehead rested against mine for a fleeting moment, and the world seemed to quiet. I should have felt trapped, but instead there was a strange comfort in her closeness, as if the wilderness itself had finally acknowledged I didn't have to face it alone. She shifted, pulling the blanket tighter around us, her arm lying heavy across my chest. The weight wasn't threatening, it was grounding. The beastwoman's eyes, golden and watchful even in drowsiness, softened when they met mine. "You are mine," she murmured, voice rough, yet carrying something deeper than possession. Her clawed hand tapped the blanket, then my chest. "Our nest." The words sank into me. What had been a lonely camp, a strip of cloth for warmth, and a dying fire had transformed into something I hadn't realized I craved, a place of belonging. My survival log would never capture this. No sterile entry could explain how a stolen blanket became a bond. As dawn broke and the forest stirred, I didn't think about the shuttle or the mission waiting beyond the trees. I thought only of the warmth beside me, the quiet protection in her embrace, and the fragile nest we now shared. And softly I answered, "Yes, our nest."